So I want to welcome everybody again to this adult programs, First Church Adult Programs on. So you want to publish a book. And I'm going to introduce each of the presenters tonight and let them have a short moment to talk about before they do their presentation, to actually tell us how they came to write the book in the first place, because the focus of the program is really on publishing. So I'm going to start this very short go round with Dorothy Stoneman, who grew up in this church. And so I am going to turn this over to her to tell us how she came to write her book.
Hi, everybody. It was great to hear your introductions and know why you're here. I wrote the book, Our Daughter's Heart. I wrote it in 1981, actually, because it was basically a diary that helped me make it through the challenge that my husband and I were facing, which was to guide our 5-year-old daughter through heart surgery. And it was, we were both working full time. There was all this pressure. So I was writing it in order to keep a record. And then I put it into the computer for probably 30 years. And in 2021, I said, I think I should probably make this information available to people. So that was when I moved to publishing. But the writing was really done to keep my mind clear while figuring out how we manage it.
Okay, great. Now we're going to hear from Yasmin Azad. She's going to tell us how she came to write her book.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. So I was born in Sri Lanka and migrated to the United States about 40 years ago. Sri Lanka is a majority Buddhist country with a small minority of Muslims, about 10%, and that was the community in which I was raised. So my book titled Stay Daughter is about the Muslim community, this Muslim community, and the way it changed when it was exposed to Western influences, particularly the education of women in Christian schools, which is an experience that I had too. And the title of my book, Stay Daughter, derives from a saying in the Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslims. It tells women, stay in your houses or your homes and do not display yourselves. So the question I explore in my book, which is something that I've been almost passionately interested in, is what happens to traditional communities when women do not stay in their homes, when literally and metaphorically they go out of their homes and culture. And that's something I thought about for about 20 years, maybe in the past, or maybe even earlier. And that's where my writing journey actually begins, as it does for many writers, or for you even, an idea that sort of percolates in your mind, and then you suddenly think that maybe I should get down to writing it. So that's how I wrote the book.
Thank you. And now we're going to hear from Kathy Crawley.
Hi, everybody. First, I'm so happy that Deborah and Diane are here from Taos. They're my buddies for the past 4 years, many years. We did a writing group together, a writing program that I'll tell you about in a minute. And Mark Davis had given me the idea of writing a book called Murder in the Rummage Sale. And so Mark, open invitation for you to collaborate with me on that book. So the book that I'm talking about tonight is my novel, Walking on Fire. And it's based on experiences that I had. Well, I'll say the setting and characters. When I went to Thessaloniki, Greece, in September of 1974 to work as a speech therapist in the Center for Greek Cerebral Palsy Children. When I planned to go, I didn't realize that the junta would fall in July of the same year that I was going. And so when I went, I was dropped into a boiling cauldron of anti-Americanism that I, from my conservative background, didn't really understand at all. And I have been writing stories about those 2 years that I had in Greece when democracy came roaring back and political parties, people that had been in exile, people that had been tortured, things like Beatles music was forbidden in the country. So everything came streaming back in at the time when I went to Greece. So it was a really exciting time to be there. Those 2 years have been very pivotal in my life. And so I've been wanting to write to get a better idea of why these experiences were so important to me and actually what they've meant and what they have sort of helped me move forward with my life as an adult. It's the book, what I intended to write a memoir. And then when I started doing writing exercises daily about 7 years ago when I retired, I realized that my writing flowed much better when I wrote in the third person rather than in the first person. And then I found an online writing course, which was 9 months in length with 2 amazing writing teachers. And that's where I met Deborah and Diane. And that's where the novel was born at the end of 9 months. So, oh, isn't that funny? I didn't even realize that. But yeah. And so that's how I came to write my book.
Wonderful. All right, so now we're going to go to actually giving each of the presenters 10 minutes of time to dig down into the publishing aspects. And so we're going to start this round with Yasmin. And the first thing we're going to do is to show her book title, her cover. So I'm looking for, to make sure that, Yasmin, you can speak.
Yes, thank you. So as you can see, there are 2 book covers. The first is of my book that was published in 2020 in Sri Lanka by a small publisher. And the second book on to the right is what's going to come out in 2023 in March in the UK by a British publisher. So that's why that's part of my publishing journey. Thank you. So as I said, once I had begun to think about this topic that I wanted to write about, I felt, like Kathy said, the need to be sort of have a network of supportive writers. As most writers know, it's a very lonely and hard job to do alone. And so I signed up for a lot of workshops at Grub Street, which many of you may know is a teaching center in Boston. And that for me turned out to be a very good decision because it gave me a network of writers, some of whom knew the writing world much better than I did. And through that network, I was able to find an experienced editor. Besides learning a lot from the workshops that I did, I was able to find an experienced editor who in turn helped me to get an excerpt of my book in a literary magazine here, the Solstice Literary Magazine, and then later on in the Massachusetts Review. And I think for traditional publishing, it helps a lot if you can have like even a small excerpt or an essay or any kind of thing in a reputable magazine, because it gives you some exposure. It makes agents stop and pay some attention to you, which is very hard to get agents to do. So that's, I feel like getting those 2 journal publications was very important for my traditional publishing route. And in 2017, I attended Grub Street has an annual writing conference. It's well known and regarded, in the United States. It's called the Muse and the Marketplace. And one of the services that they offered was an opportunity to pitch like the first 25 pages of your book to a literary agent, there were many literary agents at the conference. And so I chose to pitch it to 2 agents. And the thing about that is because I had been at Grub Street and I talked to other writers, they said it's very important to choose literary agents who are interested in the kind of book that you are writing. Just to send a mass market, here I am, do you like my book, to any literary agent is complete waste of time. So I researched the agents, their bio and what kind of books they had already published and their likelihood of their being interested in my book, and chose 2 agents. And they got back to me at the conference, and one was encouraging, but said I had some issues and needed to change in the book, and another, an agent from a New York agency, Distel Godrich is the name of the agency. She said she loved the book and she signed she took me on and we signed a 1-year contract within, in that 1 year, it was coming to about 9 months, she'd been approaching publishers and she didn't sell the book. Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan publisher that took me on had seen my excerpt in the Solstice Journal, and they contacted me and said, we want to publish your book. And so I thought, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. The literary agents, I think they take sometimes an average of 2 to 3 years to find a publisher. I said, here's one who wants to publish. So I didn't renew my contract with the New York agency. I went to the Sri Lankan agency and they published my book in 2020. Which, I think I was very lucky because they also agreed to publish it within like about a year, because even if a literary agent sells your book, well, it can take at least 2 years or even more for the publisher to bring it out. That's as long as it takes. As I said, I have the UK publisher. So when they're doing their new edition, they were given my manuscript. There's hardly anything to correct, but even they took a 1.5 years to bring it out. They signed a contract with me in 2021 and they're bringing it out in 2023. So, traditional publishing you have to have a lot of patience. And I think because I don't know, I got a review in the Kirkus Review magazine, which is a well-regarded magazine, and it was chosen as a notable book of 2020 in that category. And it has now been acquired, I think, over 100 US libraries. And I think all that partly is because it's traditional, you get more exposure. Librarians are more, I think, really, I don't know, it seems like they're more willing to consider a book if it goes through the traditional book publishing route. And they've told me that too sometimes, so then in late 2020, a British agent who has a connection to my Sri Lankan publisher contacted me and said he would like to sign me on and sell the publishing rights internationally, which of course I was thrilled about. And so in 2021, he took me on, and then this British publisher, Swift Press, signed a contract with me. The agent also sold my book to 2 publishers publishers in Bulgaria and Russia. I haven't heard about what they're doing with those rights, but the UK, as I said, is coming out in 2023. So I think I'm partly the public, there's a stroke of luck, or shall I say, what I'm writing about is a subject that has a lot of people are interested in because it's very current. It's dealing with Muslim women. If you think of what's happening in Iran right now and about the burqa, and that's something that I deal with in the book, that I am of the generation that threw away the burqa, and what does that mean? So it's a coming together of a lot of luck and being, in a place where my book has some appeal to people interested in these current events. And the other good thing for me about the book is that both my agent and the British publisher have told me that they're interested and want first dibs on my second book, which is a very nice place to be, because I won't then have to go back to market and the Muse and the Marketplace and see if there's somebody else who wants to. I mean, that doesn't guarantee at all that they take it on, but at least they look at it, and if they're not interested, I'll be able to find out why. So that's where I am with the publishing, and it's been a long, in some ways, a very long journey, but I'm happy to be where I am. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Yasmin. And I will just say personally, I have a lot of questions. I'm holding on to those questions until we get to the Q&A at the very end. We're going to hear each of the presenters, and then we'll open it up for questions to everyone. So the next speaker is going to be Dorothy Stoneman, and we're going to show her book title first, her book cover, sorry. And I'm just going to change the screen here.
That little girl on the cover, Sierra Stoneman Bell, she also grew up in the church.
Okay. Well, so it's nice to see both of your pictures there.
And that's John Bell, my husband. And some of you know him. Helping a child go through several years of preparation. And we learned when she was 9 months old that she was going to have surgery when she was about 4 years old. So there were years of preparation. And then there was the actual experience. And so this is a major role for parents. And figuring out how to navigate the medical establishment is a piece of that. When I realized that I did try to get it published back in the 80s, I actually took it to a couple of agents or publishers, I don't remember which, and they said, no, we're not going to publish this. This is too radical an approach to parenting. So it went back into my records for the next 30 years or so. And then it felt to me like what we went through and how we handled it. And now that my daughter was grown up and she came out so healthy and well, and she had now no trauma from her experience. And back in when we were actually going through this process, the doctor was warning us that if you treat your daughter like that, she's going to be a hellion when she's a teenager. You can't give her this much influence over her situation. But she turned out to be, an extremely happy, successful young adult. So, and she's 44 now. So so then I said, okay, now is the time to publish this book, because actually the criticisms that we took back then turned out not to be true. And this could be really useful to other parents. But now when it came to publishing, I do not have the patience which Yasmin described as necessary to deal with traditional publishing. And I had written many handbooks in my role as a president of an international nonprofit, Youth Build USA. Some of you know about it and have heard of it. And I had always had a staff person who would do the layout and the, putting in the photos and stuff. And so that seemed like a good thing. So when I decided to publish this, I turned to one of those staff people who used to work for me, asked if she knew how to do it. I had watched my husband go through 27 months of waiting for somebody in a publishing company that had accepted him and was going to publish his book 27 months before they gave him any comments on the book that he'd written. I'd had other experiences where I had a book already written, but they didn't want to see the book. They wanted to see a proposal for the book. So I didn't want to go through writing a proposal for a book that was already written. I wanted to make it available to the people who might benefit from reading it if they knew it existed. And so it was very simple. So this young woman, Marcia, took my text. She did a little copy editing. She did the layout. I gave her the photos and told her where to put them. She laid that out. And then she did the actual publishing on Amazon. She put it up there. I didn't do one thing except write the book. And I'm very happy about that. But the downside of this is that even though I published it in April of 2021, there's only about 50 or 60 people who have read this book. So I had no publicist and I had no plan for a publicist. I just wanted to make it available. And I thought, well, if somebody's looking for guidance on how to handle a challenging medical situation, it'll be there for them. But I do notice that if I Google books helping parents go through surgical challenges with their children, my book doesn't pop up. So I haven't arranged for people who might be looking for it to actually be able to find it very well. And but I don't really mind. At least it's out there, and at least it's not sitting inside my computer as a resource that's not available to anybody. And I suppose if I Googled it in a little more complicated way, I could find it. I enjoyed doing it that way. It was quite a pleasure and there were no frustrations. Let me see if there's anything else I should add. Probably it would be possible to get a publicist and actually make it available to people looking for this kind of information. And it actually did turn out to be when people began to read it, they actually found the most valuable part being the parenting. It's like a whole philosophy of parenting that is somewhat unusual and has a lot of respect for the role of the child and figuring things out together in a collaborative way. So people have used it for that. And the other thing that I've enjoyed about having done it that way, of course, I can order it on Amazon anytime I want to, and then I can just send it to friends. So I keep books available, and it's a nice gift for people when I want to give it to them. And last week, a high school classmate of mine from Belmont High sent me a book he wrote. So I sent him my book, and it's just nice to share. And that's my opening statement.
Okay, so what's interesting is now you've heard two different ways of doing things. You've heard the traditional publishing route and self-publishing. And now we're going to hear from Kathy Crawley, who actually did a hybrid version. And then we're going to open it up to questions. So Kathy, we're going to show your wonderful cover. And you can start talking anytime.
So I just want to start with a disclaimer. So although this book was based on the locale and friends that I made in Greece, it's fictional. And I had a really good time going off into the wild blue yonder with fiction. So it's not my life story. So when my book was finished, Sean Murphy, who was one of the teachers, said, you should enter a contest every month. And that was how he got his book to be noticed and to be published. And so I started off and found a website that had contests that were available for fiction. I tried that for a few months and really didn't get anywhere with that. So I had thought, well, I'm just going to self-publish because I had heard how hard it was to be to be accepted by a traditional publishing house. At my age, I really didn't want to spend the time of finding an agent and having it shopped around and then maybe, ending up in a shopping bag. So I started looking at self-publishing, and it just seemed very complex, and to do everything myself. And I heard about hybrid publishing. So I started interviewing as many people as I could find who had published, and I did a lot of research about hybrid publishing. I found there is a group called BookBaby, and they have sort of an a la carte menu of different things that you can purchase from them for publishing. I did get in touch with a couple of smaller publishing houses, hybrid publishing houses. And then I saw a video that a woman named Brooke Warner did, and she was one of the on the ground floor with hybrid publishing, wrote the standards for the industry, and talked about her company called She Writes Press, which is an independent female publishing group. And a friend of mine who's an author said, well, they're very strict with their vetting, but go ahead and try it. So although it was a reach for me, I contacted their website, found out when they'd be open for submissions, and I submitted. And what they required was the first 50 pages of my novel, and then synopsis of each of my chapters. And I was also told that they had a very large number of submissions, so they were doing a two-tiered process. I submitted in May of 2021. Maybe a month or two later, I found out that I'd made it through the first tier. Of course, I was gobsmacked. And then I found out that I made it through the second tier. So I signed a contract with them in August of 2021. Now, hybrid publishing is not inexpensive. Fortunately for me, I had a cowboy grandmother from Texas who always wanted me to be a writer, and I still had a little bit of money left in an account. And I thought it would make my grandmother so happy if I used that money for hybrid publishing. So that's how I've been able to go along this course. So hybrid publishing, in the case of my company, you pay them a fee, and then they will shepherd you through the process. I will pay for the printing of my book, and there are other costs that I'm incurring along the way. But basically, it's a way for me to get my book into a broader world. Another reason that I wanted to be chosen by She Writes is they do have distribution. Some hybrid companies do, some don't. This She Writes has distribution through Ingram Publishing Services, and they send books out through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, independent bookstores, even libraries. So this worked for me. And I have to say that the publishing process has sort of been, in some ways, more difficult for me than writing the actual book. Every task is a new task, and it's all things that I didn't know anything about. But I worked with the art department for and did a multi-page answered multi-page inquiry about my book and gave it to the art department, and then worked with them to choose the cover. And they suggested that I hire a professional copy editor, which I did, which was money very well spent. But then they have provided a blueprint for me to go along. So after the copywriting and the cover, there was a proofreader. And right now I'm working with a book designer, which is a very tedious process, because your manuscript, your Word document, needs to be justified and put on pages, which means there's a regularity of spacing and page breaks and things that I had no idea about. So I'm trying to think what else. I will welcome any questions that you have about the hybrid publishing process. I think what I've been warned about is that you do have to be careful because there are lots of companies out there that will try to sell you services that you don't need. Like, I think it's called the ISBN number. You can get that on your own, or like even a Library of Congress number. There are things that you can do on your own, and some companies will try to sell you those services. But for somebody like me who needs some assistance with how to navigate this world of publishing, this has been a really good solution. And so that's my hybrid story.
Okay, so I'm going to now put us into gallery view so I can see all of you, because I can't call on you if you have a little screen, a box. But before we actually open it up for everyone to ask questions, I'd like to know, Kathy, Yasmin, and Dorothy, do you have any questions for each other? Because, you know, you may want to share some more information. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Well, one thing that's occurred to me is for us to compare the cost of each of them. And for me, I think my process cost about $2,500.
For my company, their basic fee is $8,500, but that doesn't cover the printing of the book. My company gives 60% royalties back to me, which I think is higher. I don't know, Yasmin, what your royalties are, but I understand 60% is higher than usual traditional publishing houses, but that's 60% of all of a variety of costs. So I really don't expect to make any money back on this. And my company did strongly recommend that their authors hire a publicity firm. And I don't want to talk about the price of that, but it's really expensive. So I think that's probably the biggest expense that I will have with this book.
Yasmin, you're muted.
Okay, so with traditional publishing, the author does not pay for anything, not to the literary agent or the publisher. The publisher actually gives you some money. You know, it's not much, but they gave me some money, each of the ones that acquired my book, and also the royalties. But I did spend quite a bit of money preparing to publish. All the workshops I did at Muse and, at Grub Street, those were expenses. But the publishing itself, that's the one good thing about traditional. Well, not one good thing, but they pay you. You don't, if you have a literary agent who says you have to pay them, there's something wrong there.
And then Yasmin, how much money do they give you for the sales of the book? What percentage do you get?
I have to look at my contract because I can't remember, but like when this I do remember, when my original publisher sold the publishing rights to the UK publisher, I got 60% of the sales money, and the agent got 20, and my original publisher got 20. Those figures I remember, but I can't quite remember what the royalty payment. I was just too thrilled to look at it.
Right. Okay, I'm going to open it up to everyone now to see, because I want to make sure that if you have any specific questions about your particular interest and how you can make it happen, you'll have the opportunity to ask our presenters. Anyone? You can raise your hand. Richard.
Well, I'm curious, particularly with Kathy, about any sort of book tour I have a friend that has also published with She Press, and she has a book tour of some sort. But I hadn't realized what you had suggested, that she might have had to pay for a promotional company to help her with that.
You're muted, Kathy.
unmute. So, yeah, and as a matter of fact, there are lots of contests that you can enter in as an author, but She Writes doesn't enter you in contests. And so I think you have to enter yourself. And Yasmin, I don't know if you had to pay for your Kirkus review, but I have a friend who's an author who did have to pay for the Kirkus review. So there's that aspect of it. As far as a book tour, I'm having to just sort of titrate this experience for myself emotionally. Right now, I have a Wednesday deadline to get back the galleys to the book designer, and I can't see beyond that. So I think at some point there may be some kind of promotional tours, but I don't want to think about it now.
Well, Kathy, can you tell us when the book is going to be available? Because one of the things that we would like to do, I'm speaking now for the Adult Programs Committee, I hope I'm not just speaking alone, that we would certainly like to have a program and to have people, read the book.
That'd be awesome. It's the publication date is June 13th, 2023. That may vary, but I'm sort of planning to have a book launch. I'm going to rent the parish hall and have a party, and so that's
No. You don't need to rent the parish hall.
But anyway,
We'll do the program for you.
okay, all right.
You're
Okay.
a member of the congregation. We will handle that. So
In June, everybody will be invited, and we'll have Greek food and maybe even a dance band. So,
okay, that sounds really good to look forward to. Other questions of Kathy or anyone?
Melva
Melva
has
had
her
her
hand
hand.
up.
Melva, go ahead.
So I had a couple of questions. It seems like people are publishing like books, whether it's a novel or a memoir, but what if you have smaller things? Like I have like poems and short stories. Like if somebody asked me for 50 pages of that, it might take the rest of my life. So like, are these sort of pieces perceived differently than, I guess, more prose like work?
I don't know.
Richard, do you have an idea about that since you've published poems?
Yeah, there are competitions that involve what they call a chap book, which originally was these chapmen that would hand out the latest chapter of a Charles Dickens book. And it's evolved into being kind of a half length, maybe a 20 or 30 page staple bound volume. So there are publishers that are interested in that kind of length. But in terms of a poetry volume, a lot of times the publisher will want you to be an active reader of your work and, contact and engage with various venues. And that's the way that you kind of sell your work, in a in-person, one event at a time fashion. And I don't know, Yasmin, if you've been engaged in any kind of reading circles, your book.
Because of my book was published in 2020, just when the COVID. So I've had quite many book groups, featuring my book where I would participate. And I've had book presentations at libraries, but they've always, until now, has been on Zoom. I had a few in person, but the libraries are a very good place to begin with, like if you can get talk to the, especially if it's your local library, you can talk to them and ask if you can present the book. So that's, yeah, but I found book groups and libraries the best places for me.
And the other question I had was, I guess, how do you know, like, that you're getting a good contract? Like I have absolute confidence in my ability to do lots of things, but I do not speak business. And I am very worried about being taken advantage of because someone wrote things in a way that I don't find clear.
So Lillian, you'll be sending out the links, right? I posted
Yes, in
two
fact,
links.
there are
Right.
resources that we've gathered from our presenters. that
Right.
Everyone who is here, I have your email addresses except for Deborah and Diane, which Kathy can send to you. I will be sending it as a document to everyone, and then you will have those resources.
Right. So Melva, the two links that I submitted, one was how to find a literary agent, and the other one was how to publish. And that was focused on traditional publishing. And they're written by Jane Friedman, who's a blogger, who's been in the writing world for a long time, and pretty comprehensive articles. So you might find that useful about how to find a literary agent and also how to decide what kind of contract is a good one. Yeah. So
And can I just say that you might want to go to Jane Friedman's website,
yeah.
Friedman, because she offers lots of courses.
That's
I don't know if there would be anything that would be of interest, but for the group, it's she has very high quality in services about writing and publishing.
right. And it's a blog, so even if you don't make use of the services she provides, you can just read her articles, her blog posts, and learn a lot from that. And there are lots of other resources too, right? But she's somebody I respect, so that'd be a good place to start.
And do you want to mention Poets and Writers?
Yeah.
Bi-monthly publication that lists a lot of
Right.
awards and conferences, and has a lot of information about agents and what their
Right.
needs are, and a great resource.
If you send me that information, Richard, I can include it.
Okay,
The resource, just send me an email with it.
sure. Joe had his hands up.
Oh, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's fascinating to hear those stories. Could almost write a book on your stories, telling about how you wrote. One question I have for you, maybe Kathy, I don't know if the others know, is that some people are contracting with, is it Amazon? Some of those online, mega publishers. I've heard some horror stories about that and some good stories. Some of the stories that maybe need to be approaching them, if one wishes to do that for volume sales and so forth, is that they do take a lion's share of your profits, or at least of your fees or money that you could earn. Have any of you had that experience or have heard about going into a contract? Because they have businesses as well, and I think they also have books that
Well, I've been paying attention to publishers, and a couple of books that I've read for a book group. I look Willow Press, I think that was it. But what is Willow Square Press? And it's an imprint of Amazon, and the books are well done. And I think they have a variety of imprints. I don't know about the shady side of Amazon, other than what we all know about the shady side of Amazon. But I wonder, again, that might be something that Jane Friedman might have a blog about. You might look on her website and see in her archival material. Yasmin, do you think that, have you noticed, ever seen anything that she's done?
I can't recall that I have, but you know, very likely she has, but you know, one of the advantages of publishing with Amazon, and you know, Amazon is the bookseller these days, is that you have certain advertising privileges which other people don't have. You know, if you publish with Amazon, they give you the, you know, like you can do all kinds of things like bring down the price and sell it for $1 for certain, and then have it come up in the more, you know, like in their advertised on their site and things like that. So that's the the upside to that. But I also want to mention, you know, my oldest son has a book, it's on mathematics, but still Amazon published it and it's been on sale for more than 10 years and it's doing, you know, it's doing well, meaning it seems to have no problems. They pay him when he sells book.
Well, I know that the publisher of a couple of my books, they made the deal with Amazon, which got a little bit complicated because they took part of the share of the proceeds. And so to hear 60% of proceeds coming to an author, as a couple of you have mentioned, is phenomenal, because all the publishing companies that have had different versions of my book and different editions, in the academic world, 15%, 18% is really good. 15% is if you're a newcomer. And then if the book starts selling really well, you can get 20 to 25%. But wow, interesting.
But there are a lot of costs in the book world. There's something like you have to order a certain amount of books, and then though you may need to pay for storage after a certain time. And then the books that don't get sold, they are returns, and there's a cost for the returns. So there are a lot of costs in that that trickle out of that 60%.
Good point. Well, Kathy, when you listed all of the things that have to go into selling and making a book, I appreciated that. Is that right? It's not a free ride.
No.
I was just going to say too that one of the things that I've learned is that what is the motive for somebody wanting to write a book? And I think the three of you talked a bit about that, but I know that I was hired to write a couple of books, and my motive and my motivation was kind of waning because it is a long process, and it can be torturous as well as a love for doing it. But I would just throw that out. And I was wondering if all three of you or any of you were, did you start losing your motivation once you got into the actual process of writing and selling it?
Anyone?
My motivation was simple, that I wanted to make good information available to people who wanted it. And since I took the easy path, I didn't lose my motivation. It did make me happy when people who read it started to say, wow, I couldn't put it down. This was really a good read. I'm going to, tell my family to read it. So it's just a pleasure. It's part of relating to the world, I guess. And it was never my core ambition or anything to write or to be visible, or it wasn't even my main impact. But it's good to be able to put out there the ways in which you might be useful.
I just want to say that, like those lessons learned from Canada Geese, that figure out the direction you want to go in and have others go in that same direction. Diane and Deborah have been my Canada Geese because we have been in a critique group, and we've exchanged our manuscripts over several years times now. And so I think when you can build a companionship around your writing, that is, number one, you learn so much from critiquing someone else's work. And number two, it becomes more of a joint venture.
Getting back to Amazon, I just want to say that it seems to be an environment in which it's print on demand.
Mhm.
So, where it used to be traditionally, you'd have to commit to the printing of, 1,000 or 2,000, to make a reasonable business plan. Now you can, print as you go. So with my contract, if I kept selling books, then they would continue to keep it in print with 12 copies a year. It used to be that would be absurd to have 12 copies as a run, but now it's possible, and it allows for more voices to be heard and more niche publishing to happen than would have happened in the old way of doing things.
Right.
Right. And one of the advantages of because of my son, I know it was only about $40 that they wanted for, the whole thing. You have to, of course, you have to design it. But one of the things they offer is that you can change your manuscript anytime you want for pay, because it's print on demand, which you cannot do which you could not do before, right? Once a book is published, you can pay a small fee and say, well, I want to do a few changes here. Down the road, you can do that. So-
Also, with the magical algorithm, Amazon asked me if I would like to buy my own book. They thought that would be a natural for me.
Yes.
Did you?
And did you?
I'm tempted because it's out of print otherwise. So I don't have anything to bring to a reading.
Of course, you deferred, you would not buy a copy of your own book, correct?
Well, I don't know. I might find that in the first couple of pages, I had signed it to a close friend, and now they've sold it back to Amazon. I don't want to find that out.
Oh, that's good.
Well, this is the way that sausage gets made. You've gotten a view here of different types of the way that books are written and the way that books are published. So it's been a fascinating evening, I think. Any last questions before we wrap up?
Anybody want my book?
Yeah, I was just going to end with that. Joe, go ahead.
I'd like to know how you get onto Oprah Winfrey when you write a book, because I think, and I'm saying that a little bit comically, but Yasmin and Kathy, I mean, some of your books sound like that would be, amenable to a large audience. And maybe a publicist could do that, going back to that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to end with the fact that you have at least 2 books to read now. You have Dorothy Stoneman's book and you have Yasmin Azad's book, and you have now to wait with bated breath until June when Kathy's book comes out. So yeah, I'm sure if you haven't read those 2 books, now you know where to get them. And I will put that document in the mail, in the email that will tell you how to find those sources, because there are good sources and resources for you to have. And Ed and Kathy, who are here on this call, Ed will be posting this as on our YouTube channel probably by next week. So anyway, I really appreciate hearing from Kathy and Dorothy and Yasmin. It's been a really interesting evening of sharing of ideas. And so thank you all for coming. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next program.